Hey, I'm Jeff Baumgartner with Light Reading Cable. I'm pleased to be joined again by George Salinger with Comcast. So George, it's that time of year where we get to check in with you about CCAP. So just give us a little bit of an update on Comcast's trial and deployment activities with CCAP.
Okay, so we did trials last year, as we said publicly, and those trials went very well. We learned a lot, and now we're moving into the deployment phase. So we're doing what we call pilots. They're deployment trials. In other words, we trial what we're going to deploy. So we call them pilots because they're different from a trial. In a trial we remove the equipment. In a pilot we leave it and it becomes the deployed equipment, and it is an example of what we're going to deploy. And so we test how we're going to deploy it. And so we're involved in pilots right now. Okay. We have a bunch of them in flight. We expect to be done with them by the middle of the year and begin deployments in the second half of the year.
Okay, and now that you had a chance last year to do some testing, and maybe this year you'll find out more. But as you look at the CCAP and how it might be used in certain system sizes, is there like a threshold, where CCAP makes sense versus a big system versus a small system yet?
I get asked that a lot. I mean, some people think CCAPs are only for large systems. Right. But in reality, the CCAP is not any bigger than, as they're being implemented, and any bigger than CMTSs. They're about the same exact size. They do have twice as much density in terms of the number of ports, and they certainly support many more QAMs, even in the entire spectrum. But in terms of size, they're not any bigger than a CMTS, and so you don't necessarily have to put all the line cards in as you would do in a CMTS.
Okay. So I think build as you grow, kind of.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I also wanted to say that I think in general CMTS vendors have developed multiple size boxes. Have found that in general the small size box does not sell very well, and so it's almost better to just develop a mid-size box. Or a large size box, and just not populate the entire chassis, and it ends up being cheaper for everybody.
Now, in the past, you've talked about different applications that will drive the need for CCAP and these new densities. You've mentioned cloud DVR, IP video. I mean, are those still the main drivers, or are there some others that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, I think in general, capacity is the main driver. HSD keeps on growing at the same rate as it has been for quite some time, and that is probably the largest factor for requiring upgrades, and therefore probably the leading application that causes growth that would benefit from this box. I think in general VOD is also growing. Cloud DVR being implemented generally in the same way as VOD will add to the VOD capacity. So yeah, these are the two main drivers.
Okay. Another thing that we're keeping an eye on is the emergence of Ultra HD 4K video. I mean, where does that kind of fall on your agenda now? Is it way out in the future? Where is it?
It is a bit out in the future, but in general, I think that the adoption of 4K resolution together with HEVC will, one will compensate the other. 4K requires more capacity, HEVC requires less capacity. It's kind of the same thing that happened with 1080p and H.264. So I think they'll counter each other. In the end, we'll need about the same capacity for video as we move forward.
Okay, and the last thing I wanted to ask you about was DOCSIS 3.1. Cable Labs they're still developing the specifications, but as those start to come into play, how is DOCSIS 3.1 going to kind of fit in with CCAP?
Yeah, so it's a great question, very timely. So first of all, the CCAP platform was developed for technology evolution, right? So it was envisioned with technology evolution in mind. So DOCSIS 3.1 will very easily incorporate into CCAP. We are currently finishing with we're about halfway done with the specs or so. We'll finish them this year. DOCSIS 3.1. Okay. And so we're already starting to think about how we're going to incorporate into the CCAP spec. We expect that we'll have them incorporated by the end of the year. So they'll relatively easy incorporate into the spec.
All right. Well, George, thanks a lot for your time again. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Sure.